What's up, guys? It's your boy Hawass, aka the Bebop Files, and today we're going to be talking about the power of depth and why it's better than building a super team. Sure, building a team with the most appealing names in the league sounds like it's a great idea, but is it really the best way to win a championship? First off, let's talk about what we mean when we say super team. I think there's a lot of different definitions on what people think a super team is, but for the context of this video, I'm going to break down my definition of a super team. To me, a super team is a team that already has a star player, then goes out and adds one or multiple stars to that team. For example, the '08 Celtics, they already got Paul Pierce, an established star in the league. Then they bring in Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, making them a super team. The 2011 Heat, they already got Dwayne Wade. Then they signed LeBron James and Chris Bosh in free agency, making them a super team. The 2017 Warriors, they got back-to-back MVP, unanimous MVP Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, who are all-stars. And after making it to back-to-back NBA Finals, they decide to add NBA superstar Kevin Durant. Boom, super team. The 2021 Brooklyn Nets, they got KD, they got Kyrie, then they bring in James Harden via trade. Boom, another super team. The '04 Lakers, they got Shaq, Kobe, they've already three-peated. Then they decide to bring on Karl Malone and Gary Payton. I think you guys get the idea now. One of the biggest issues with super teams is that these teams often struggle to build chemistry. When you now have multiple players on your team who are used to being the guy and having the ball in their hands and taking the shot whenever they want, naturally, it's going to be very difficult for all these players to come together and share the spotlight. Because it is a long 82 game season, some teams are able to recover from a slow start, like the Miami Heat, who started off 8-9 but would go on to make it to the NBA Finals. But other super teams aren't able to figure it out in time, like the 2013 Lakers or the 2021 Brooklyn Nets. The biggest issue that I find when it comes to super teams is the lack of depth. Sure, on paper it looks great. You have big name talents who can dominate offensively and defensively. But what happens when one of those players gets tired or one of those players gets injured? Now you find yourself in trouble. Because it costs so much money to bring in these players and keep them on the team, now you have to spend less on the rest of your rotation, and now the rest of your team won't be as strong as your superstar players. So when your superstar player gets injured or needs to come out for rest, you're now replacing him with a player who's way less talented than him. A team who distributes their money more evenly throughout the roster and is able to have a better bench is able to withstand injuries and things happening to their superstar players. Even if one of the star players goes out, they're able to still play and be successful in winning games because the bench players are good enough to step up and fill in those shoes. For example, Jamal Murray has been in and out all season long, but the Denver Nuggets have been able to maintain the number one seed because they're able to withstand his injuries due to their depth. The Milwaukee Bucks are another example of this. Chris Middleton has been in and out all season long. Giannis has missed games. Drew Holiday's missed games. But because this team has depth and a solid bench, they're able to still win games even when one of their star players is out. This isn't a luxury that super teams are able to have. There's also some things that role players are willing to do that star players aren't willing to do. You need players who are going to do the dirty work on the defensive end, get rebounds, hustle, dive on the floor for loose balls. Players like Bobby Portis, Bruce Brown, Derek White, these are the type of players that could be the difference between winning a critical game in the playoffs and losing it. When everyone has an understanding of their role on the team, it brings a unique sense of unity and chemistry that can't be replicated on super teams. I think depth is even more important in today's NBA than it's ever been in the entire history of the NBA. And that's because of the high level of talent we have in the league. And you can see it by watching games today. Superstars just don't have that same super high level of impact that they used to. A team with LeBron James and Anthony Davis 5 or 10 years ago, no matter who else is on the team, that's a top three seed in their conference. Today, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are barely struggling to make the playoffs. Same can be said with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Two players of that level on the same team 5 years ago or 10 years ago, again, that's a top three seed in their conference, a championship contender. They're also struggling to make it to the playoffs. Same thing with KD and Kyrie. 10 years ago, that's a top seed in their conference. In today's NBA, they can't even make it past the first round. The teams that are at the top of the conference and that make it deep into the playoffs are not super teams of late. Look at the top three teams in each conference this year. You got the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics, and the Philadelphia 76ers in the East. You got the Denver Nuggets, the Sacramento Kings, and the Memphis Grizzlies in the West. Which of those teams are super teams? I mean, some people might consider the Bucks a super team, but I don't think they're a super team. I just think that's a superstar You know, he's got his number two, his number three guys solidified, and he has a deep roster around him. I mean, Drew Holiday just made his second All Star game in his career after like a 10-year span. Chris Middleton is an All Star, has been a perennial All Star for the past few years. I don't think that makes the Milwaukee Bucks a super team. Bucks aside, you go to the 76ers, it's Embiid and Harden. You go to the Boston Celtics, it's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. In the West, De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, they got a deep team around them. The Memphis Grizzlies is led by John Morant with a deep squad around him. And the Denver Nuggets, similar to the Milwaukee Bucks, is a clear number one with his number two and number three solidified and a deep squad around him. So none of these teams are by any stretch it means, by my definition, a super team. And yet these have been the most dominant teams all season long. And if we look at the most recent NBA champions, 2022, the Golden State Warriors were not a super team. The 2021 Bucks were not a super team. The 2020 Lakers were not a super team. The 2019 Raptors were not a super team. The last super team to win it was the 2018 Golden State Warriors. And the 2018 Golden State Warriors, I believe, are an outlier as a super team. Most teams have to give up their depth in order to keep all the stars on their roster. But due to unique circumstances, the Golden State Warriors didn't necessarily have to do that. Because of a cap spike thanks to a new TV deal signed by the NBA, and on top of the fact that the Warriors were able to sign Steph Curry to a discounted deal due to ankle injuries he dealt with earlier in his career, the Warriors were able to sign Kevin Durant without totally giving up their depth. They still were able to keep Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson, the main trio of the team. But on top of that, their key role players, Sean Livingston and Andre Iguodala, still were able to be on the team. And because of this, the Golden State Warriors are a unique case where they didn't necessarily have to give up their depth while being a super team. And that's one of the reasons I think they were so special. If they weren't able to keep Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston, I don't think that team has the same success. I think this is going to be another year that proves depth will always overcome super teams. I don't believe this year's Phoenix Suns are a super team because I think Chris Paul has aged quite a bit and he's not really at that high level anymore. And I don't think DeAndre Ayton's at that level. But some people do consider the Suns to be a super team. Some people think that the Suns will win the championship this year, but I don't think they will. I think, again, depth is a big issue for the Suns. Now, this would be a whole different story if they acquired KD the same way the Warriors acquired KD, where they didn't have to give up much of their team. If this team was able to keep Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and then add KD to the roster, then it's a whole different story. That team's winning the championship. But the loss of those two pieces, I think is going to be tough for the Phoenix Suns to overcome when they face a team with great depth. Maybe the Suns might be able to escape the first round, second round, maybe even make it to the finals. But if they face a team out east with great depth like the Milwaukee Bucks, I don't think they'll be able to overcome that. When you look at super teams, I think they typically tend to underachieve. Let's look at the Miami Heat. They started off by saying not two, not three, not four. They went on to win 2 out of 4 championships. The first one, they lost because LeBron James underperformed in the NBA Finals. They won 2 in a row after that. And then they lost the last year because Dwayne Wade's health deteriorated. And like I said, when one of the star players starts dealing with injuries and missing time, the effect is much larger because you don't have the same depth that you would otherwise. And they lost to what? A team with great depth. The Spurs weren't a super team. They were just a team with great depth that was playing amazing basketball, and that defeated a super team. Like I said, in today's NBA, with the talent at an all-time high, with the smartest coaches we've ever had, super teams just aren't going to cut it anymore. A lot of times these super teams resort to just relying on the superstar and playing isolation basketball, which honestly is really easy to defend, but it becomes a lot harder to defend when you don't know who's going to go off on a certain night. Teams with depth have a lot more flexibility and adaptability that super teams don't have. Having depth allows coaches to have multiple moves at their disposal. They can make in-game adjustments on the fly, make counters to their opponent's moves because they have so many guys on their bench who do different things that they can put into the game and impact the game in different ways. This allows you to take away your opponent's strengths and exploit your opponent's weaknesses in ways that super teams don't because you don't have that personnel. I personally think the era of super teams is done. Just because the level of talent in the NBA is higher than it's ever been, 10, 15, 20 years ago, having 3 superstars was maybe equivalent to having 10 good players on another team. But today, I think having 3 superstars might be equivalent to having 5 solid players on your team, just because these 5 solid players now are way better than what 5 solid players would have been 10 years ago because the level of talent is so good today. A little confusing. I hope that made sense, but I hope you guys understood what I was trying to say there. Now, although I said I believe the superstar era is done, the NBA is always revolving and changing around, and I wouldn't be surprised if a super team in the future changes things. And we all know the NBA is a copycat league, so if one super team comes back and dominates, then you know everyone's gonna try and start doing super teams again. But right now, today in the NBA in 2023, super teams are just not it. I think the Lakers fan base can attest to that. You swap out Russ, bring in D'Lo, Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley, you bring in some rotation players and your team looks a lot better. So while it might be tempting to go after that shiny new toy in free agency, Kyrie Irving, don't underestimate the power of depth. So the next time you're watching a game, keep an eye out on the role players, especially in the playoffs, because they just might be the key to victory. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content from yours truly. This is Hawass, aka the B-Ball Files, signing off.